Hey, family, it is Tuesday night. Time for TNT, Tuesday Night Transformation. So grateful for all of you who have joined on this amazing day, a day that God has truly gifted us with. For those who are watching, I need to know you are here. I need to let my producer to know, do whatever he needs to do so y'all can jump on in. But if you're here, let me know what part of the world you are from, where you're joining from. I'll make sure I shout you out on tonight. So let's go, beloved. Drop your name in the chat and let us know what your location is. Columbus, Ohio, what's good? New York City. All right. Harlem is in the house. I love it. Come on, let me know where you all are joining in from on tonight. Again, welcome to Tuesday Night Transformation. Jesse in Dallas, what's good? We got Georgia in the house, Southern California, Harlem, Beantown, Boston, what's good? Good evening, Long Island. Where in Long Island? Maybe I asked you this before, but it's been a long time. Where in Long Island are you? That's my stomping ground. Georgia, Little Burn, Georgia. BX, the Bronx. I love this. I love the fact that you all are jumping on. South Carolina, what's up? Again, welcome to Tuesday Night Transformation. Freeport, stop playing with me. You better stop playing with me. I graduated from Freeport High School, 1989. Stop playing. Freeport, come on, talk about it. My people. Richmond, VA. Yes, I love it. Listen, I'm so glad. One, I just want to thank you all for being so incredibly understanding. Lisa, I'm okay. I haven't been feeling great. I had a doctor's appointment today. There's some things that we got to deal with, but I'm grateful in advance, thankful in advance, and feeling good right now. And so, I'm trusting God. I've been trusting God for 53 years. And so whatever comes my way, I trust God. But I'm grateful for you all and grateful to be here. I am resting. I haven't done much yesterday or today and plan on doing even little tomorrow. So I'm good. But I you all for a second. Amen. Amen, beloved. I don't know, Mr. Producer, if we're having issues. I know my screen keeps buffering. So tell me something. Give me a message in the private chat. Let me know what's going on if you know. But again, welcome to Tuesday Night Transformation and this time together. Make sure, again, as you join, someone just said, it's frozen. Yes, my producer, it is frozen. It freezes off and on. I'm talking to my producer Dorian, but I don't know what's going on. It's not from my end. So hopefully we'll get through this tonight. There are buffering issues, but I don't believe that is with my computer. It might be with the platform we are using tonight, StreamYard. So hopefully that we have that problem solved. Aaliyah said Freeport is in the building. So I have to be good. Yeah. Freeport all the way. Well, I grew up in Roseville. I lived in Roseville, but I went to Freeport High School. So yeah. So last Tuesday when we were in the building, so grateful for all of you who joined in. and those who are watching. I really enjoyed last week, turned into kind of doing a kind of Bible basics format. And so I thought about that. So I'm going to talk to the team, and we're going to get a date because I want to give people a chance, at least a couple of weeks, to get it. But it made me think about a book that I taught at the church with Pastor Dez, I think in 2021, How to Read the Bible by Harvey Cox. I'm going to teach from this book again for about a month. I think it is worth it. It is a tremendous book because what I realized is that many people read the Bible, but they don't necessarily know how to read the Bible in terms of understanding the important aspects of the Bible. It's, if you were in the building last week or watching last week, I talked about historical critical method, higher biblical criticism. How to Read the Bible is an excellent book by Harvey Cox. I've taught from it at FCBC before. I want to bring it back. It's not an expensive book. It's $12. You probably can get it cheaper than that, to be honest with you. But we'll put an announcement in the Live and 5 to let people know to get it. But I'm telling you now, we're going to get a start date sometime in October and give ourselves about 2 weeks to get this ready. But How to Read the Bible by Harvey Cox is what we are going to be reading. Now, if you're still there with me, I want to see a thumbs up so I know that you're still there. Hit me with a thumbs up so I just know you're still there and we're not having issues and everybody's still with me at this point. So I was saying that after last week, it just pointed out to me, it was clear that these kinds of Bible basics, these kinds of teaching the fundamentals of how we engage the scripture is important. Thank you for your prayers. I appreciate it. And thank you for the thumbs up. Good. I'm glad you all are getting it. But thank you for the prayers. Keep on praying. Keep on praying in this season because, you know, we're still dealing with some stuff with my health. So keep on praying. But I want to really go back to this book. I'm going to show it to you one more time. Write it down. How to Read. Somebody said they got it. Junior said he got $2.99 super stick. Great book. So clearly it's out there. 12 on Amazon, cheaper other places. And I'm sure that, you know, it's not a tough investment, but it's a great book. Trust me when I tell you, it is a great book and it's going to be helpful, I think. Peggy said, did you take the class? You said you have the book. You must have taken the class with me. If you did, let me know. But we're going to be starting this book. So get it now. We'll get a start date in the next few weeks. I literally thought of this past week and after the TNT actually last week, and I really want to do this book. And I think it'll just be helpful for us in this season, in this moment. So I think I'm looking forward to it. Because again, I think many people read the Bible, but are not always clear as to how we engage the Bible at FCBC. What is higher biblical criticism? What is the historical critical method? Some things that I talked about last week. And so I think this is going to be an important beginning. Let me just read some of the chapters for you. I just think it's good. Some of the chapters are called Talking Back to God from the Garbage Heap, the Book of Job, Listening to the Voice of the Voiceless, Amos and the Prophets, Getting to the Final Four, Gospels Kept and Discarded, talking about the Gospels that didn't make it into the Bible, Looking Over the Shoulders of the Writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Like, this is really good, and I'm really excited. But this is a great book, and we'll be starting that soon. So, again, get ready. If you have it already, like Peggy, you're already in the house. But if not, please get it. And I'll talk about it again at the end of TNT tonight. But I'm going to try to be not long tonight because, you know, I'm listening to all these directives from people who are reminding me to take it easy and rest. But I don't want to. But I'm not going to concede to not teaching every week. This is like, it does as much for me as it does for you all, truth be told. I love what I do and I love teaching this. It is what my calling is, but it's also my passion. And it's also what I love to do. It's an amazing thing when God calls you to do something and the thing that God calls you to do, you love. And even if you didn't start loving it, you learn to love it. But I do love this, and I love teaching. The book is entitled, I'm going to show one time, but I'm going to come back at the end and do it again. But it's How to Read the Bible by Harvey Cox. How to Read the Bible by Harvey Cox. Keep that going, Dorian, on the bottom of the screen for a while so people can, when I refer to it. But on Sunday, I want to go a little bit into this scripture that we dealt with on Sunday. That has been kind of the way we engage TNT since this virtual world started with the pandemic. Although buffering again. There we go. Here we go. Hopefully this thing, it figures itself out and we stop this buffering. But it's not on our end. It's not my end. I think it's with the platform tonight. So bear with us. Hopefully it doesn't get too bad and we'll be able to continue. But I want to read the scriptures again in the NRSV and in the Message Bible. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Pastor, they said such a good book. Pastor, yes, Pastor Des, you got on later. I said that we co-taught that book in 2021. Yeah. So Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Here's how it reads in the NRSV. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely on your own insight. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. The Message Bible puts it this way. The Message Bible says, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice. Everything you do, everywhere you go, he's the one who will keep you on track. I think the King James Version says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he shall direct your path. This passage is so powerful to me. There's so many ways you can go with it. If you look at the Message Bible version, I love it because it says, trust God from the bottom of your heart and don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who will keep you on track. You know, this passage begins with this idea of trust in the Lord with all your heart. The writer of Proverbs, Solomon, is trying to tell us that we ought to really learn to lean and trust in God. Now, here's the thing. Trusting God is something we often say, and I think I said this Sunday. There is trusting God, and then there's being in a situation when all you can do is trust God. I've certainly been there in my life, and there now where you just completely trust God. And I saw this illustration of what does it look like to trust in God. It's easy to say, hard to capture, hard at times to demonstrate. But I saw this illustration, and the illustration said this. It said, if you were going to sit down in a chair that was shaky and wobbly and didn't look sturdy, but it was the only chair for you to sit down in, the writer of this illustration said that you would sit down in it, very carefully. You would sit down in it, with a little bit of uncertainty, hoping and believing that somehow the chair would not collapse under your personal weight. Thank you, Robin. She said it's $9.99. Yeah, it's a little cheaper. Thank you. But under weight versus if you see a chair that looks sturdy, that looks fine, you sit down in it without thinking about it. You just go and sit down. And in other words, if you went to a chair that was wobbly and looked shaky, I don't know if I've done it. You sit down kind of not with your whole weight, kind of holding up a little bit because you're uncertain whether or not that chair can sustain you. And then if you see a chair that looks fine, strong, so you don't even think, you just sit down and keep on moving. In many ways, the person who I read the illustration from said that that's what we do sometimes with God. We approach God like we're approaching that shaky, uncertain, wobbly chair, not wanting to lean in fully to it, not wanting to put the full weight of who we are on it, not trusting that it can sustain us. Where at other times, when you're confident in the chair's ability to hold you, to keep, to sustain you, you don't even think about whether or not it can. You just take a seat. The writer is trying to say, in many ways, that's how we ought to view our trust in God, that we don't trust God shaped with the attitude of uncertainty, not sure if God can hold us, not sure if God can keep us, not sure if God can bear us up under the weight of living this life. And that's how we approach it. And the idea is that our trust in God ought to be as if we went to sit in the seat without a concern, because we know the chair was sturdy, strong enough to hold us. The truth is that we've had enough experiences with God to believe that no matter what the crisis, what the situation, what the obstacle, we have to trust that God can hold us, that God can sustain us, that God can bear us up if necessary, hold us up if necessary. And the way God moves, sometimes we look for this visible, tangible move of God, but sometimes God moves, as the writer says, in mysterious ways. Sometimes God moves through other people who becomes an extension of God, who God uses to help bear us up, to hold us up. And that's what the writer is trying to say in Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Lean not into your own understanding. As I said on Sunday, sometimes our thoughts are shaped negatively at times by experiences. But what the right Message Bible says, in everything, the Message Bible says, don't try. And let me read it again, because it says, trust God from the bottom of your heart and don't try to figure out everything on your own. Pause right there. Lean not into your own understanding. Don't try to figure. Trust in God's mechanisms in those seasons, right? In those moments. Because oftentimes we find ourselves in situations that are adverse. The truth. After we can't figure it out, we then go to God. I want to see my honest folk. Give me a thumbs up if you agree with that. Who can be honest tonight? There are times when we're in a pressing situation. We often try to figure it out. And it's when we can't figure it out, we go to God, right? We go to God. Whereas the truth is, and let me see that thumb up if you know that's true. If that's been you. It's no shame. I've done it. We've all done it. Whereas the reality is that sometimes if we begin with that trust in God and keeping those kind of spiritual antennas alert to how God may be moving, the way God may be moving, right? We will realize that thing we're facing, that obstacle, that challenge, that hardship, that there may be resources that God has made available, instead of us always trying to figure things out on our own. I'm telling you, I know I'm not the only one who's been in that space and been in that place where you've tried to figure it out, only to be exhausted of what you could do and then feel bad about the situation. Now, here's a good thing. Here's or maybe the ways of God. I got to tell you this, that what I found is that God can still redeem it. I'm telling you that I know that I've seen where I didn't consult God. I didn't lean in. I didn't trust God the way I should have trusted God. I put a more value in what or how I could figure it out, instead of leaning into God's presence and listening, hearing, and feeling the guidance of God through the situation. And in those moments when I didn't do that, right? When I didn't do that, I saw God come in and redeem it, turn it around in those moments. That's the beauty of being in this amazing relationship with God, that there are those moments when we have to yield, we do yield. But then there's those moments where we think, oh, you know what, God, let me handle this one. I got this one. And it doesn't work out. Things begin to collapse. God comes in and redeems it. That's what I have learned in it, right? In my life, Peggy said, yes, God's pull you from rock. With my situation coming up next month, I've been scared unto your teaching us. Thank you. Good. That's what it is. I don't know what you're referring to, Thais. I need to know the what, why, and the how. I don't know what do you, if you, I'm not sure what you're trying to ask, but but here's the point. Open to how God may move in a situation. Now, I've talked about this tons of times, and I'm going to say it again. Sometimes being open is the challenge, right? Being open is the challenge. Someone, how can I keep the faith when it feels like nothing changes and you are in the thick of the growing place? Yeah, I think you don't have, when you say, how can I keep faith? You keep faith. See, I'm about to say that. I was just about to say this. I'm glad you said that, Elaine. Someone said, what's prepared doing your part? I'm gonna get to all that. See, the issue is, I'm not saying that you abandon what you do. You abandon what you do. You have to now, you participate in what God may be doing. Now, let me tell you, let me clean this up for you real quick. So everybody, I love these questions, can get it. The next part of this scripture I read in verse 6 says, in all your ways acknowledge God, and God shall direct your path, right? The Message Bible says, listen to God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. I want to shift that a little bit, right? I want to shift that a little bit. Before I do, I now understand what you're saying, Thais. Because see, here's the thing, that we want to trust God, but as you said, we got to know the details. Well, that ain't trusting God. Because here's the reality. If God showed you the mechanisms by which God was going to do things on your behalf, the truth is sometimes God's mechanisms are so terrifying. God's ways can be so overwhelming that we would almost buckle under the weight of knowing the ways of God. Just froze again. And I'm going to put it to you like this. I wrestle with this in all your ways, right? In all that we do, acknowledge God. In all our ways, acknowledge God. I wrestle with that a little bit. And I realize, let's use our identity statement, for example. We are an ever-evolving community of visionaries, dreamers, and doers who've been called by God to live the lives we are created to live, commanded by God to love beyond limits of our prejudices, and commissioned by God to serve. Called to live, commanded to love, commissioned to serve. We live, we love, we serve. We got that. For us at FCBC, live, love, and serve is the guiding principle for our decisions as a team, as leadership. We are shaped by live, love, and serve. All that we do is connected to that. When I think of the teachings of the carpenter, how we shape our lives as believers, we are guided by the teachings of the carpenter. Now, this is important. I want people to get this part, why I'm saying this, and I'm going somewhere with this. Because the Bible as a book holds so many things, books of law, wisdom, literature, poetry, all these things that are critical for us. The Old Testament is really about Israel's journey with God, the narrative of Israel's growth and evolution as a people with God, right? But at the same time, and we look at that journey. Why is that journey important? Why is that story important? Because the one that we view as Redeemer, as Savior, as Messiah was a part of that community. Jesus was born a Jew. He lived as a Jew. And he died as a Jew. We have been, as my professor said one time, we have been grafted into the Jewish narrative by way of Jesus. But at the same time, those of us who claim to be disciples, we are not just disciples of a personality, Jesus, or a person, Jesus. We are disciples of the teachings of Jesus. I want you to get this. So you say you are a follower of Jesus. You are a disciple. We have that on the stage, on the pulpit. I am a disciple. To be a disciple is not to be a disciple of just the personality, of the character, but in Christianity, in my understanding, how I teach, we are to be disciples of the teachings of Jesus. I want you to keep that. Again, Old Testament, we hold on to these narratives of Israel and their ancient story of their interaction with God, because in the Old Testament, we get these examples of how God has engaged people in the past, right? Those examples of God's engagement give us some insight, some clues into the possible ways that God moves. Now, when you read the Old Testament, it doesn't exhaust clearly all the ways of God, because we can never capture all the ways of God in these stories in the Old Testament, right? So the Old Testament holds these stories of a people and their encounter from God. We can glean from those experiences. We can glean from those narratives. We can glean from those stories. And we do. I teach from the Old Testament. We study the Old Testament. But as believers, what is your what is it that shapes you as a believer? I'm going to submit that as followers of Jesus, as disciples of Jesus, what ultimately guides us are the teachings of Jesus. Now, the teachings of Jesus are not as easy as maybe the 10 Commandments, which may be that why it's so easy for people to petition for the 10 Commandments to be put in schools. That's easy. Commandment 1, this. Commandment 2, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. But the teachings of Jesus are different. When you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the teachings of Jesus sometimes are directly stated. Sometimes they emerge in the midst of Jesus telling a story. The point is, those teachings of Jesus found in the Gospels shape our lives. You can go to Matthew 5 through 7, the Sermon on the Mount, which is Jesus's primary teaching on what it means to be a part of the kingdom of God. We can do it. That serves as a guidepost. You can go to Matthew 25. You know, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. Thirsty and you gave me drink. Those are guideposts. So if we shape our acknowledging God in all that we do, if those teachings shape our lives, praying for your enemies or loving your enemies, praying for those who persecute you, all this difficult stuff, that shapes our life. So trusting in God and leaning not on your own understanding, but his part, in all your ways acknowledging God, listening for God, seeing God in all that we do. We believe that the teachings of Jesus, that if Jesus is the Messiah, the incarnation of God, that what Jesus teaches is what God wants us to know. So those teachings become the guideposts, just like our identity statement serves as a guidepost for what we do at FCBC. Some of you have said, we say things like, well, if I trust God, I need to know. Well, that's not trust. That's not trusting God if you need to know it. That's the opposite of trust. That's the opposite of faith. I want to trust you, God, but I need you to give me a peek on how this is going to go down. I want to trust you, God, but I need to know the why, the what, the how. I need to know specifics. That's not trust. That's negotiating with God for certainty, right? It's that old, icebreaker they do sometimes where you sit in a group and you lean back to fall and someone catches you. That's trust. Great. When my children were young, even now my granddaughter, for example, there are times when my granddaughter will be standing up in the chair in our kitchen by our counter. We have these high chairs by the kitchen, and sometimes her dad is here. I'll watch her jump into his arms. He'll count 1, 2, 3. She jumps. That little girl does not jump with a doubt in her mind. She has had experience with her dad. She has jumped before. So when her dad says, jump, Leah, come on, she then trusts to jump into his arms. She believes that her dad will catch her. So when she believes that there's nothing that makes her hesitate, she believes in so much, not just her dad catching her, that someone will catch her, that even when I don't realize sometimes, when I put her in that chair, she'll jump into my arms. I got to be careful. So she's been trained how to trust because she's been caught by her dad. She's been caught by her grandfather. I hope you get this. In our journey with God, we've had many experiences where we have been trained to trust. There have been moments when we took that leap and we thought things weren't working out and God redeemed it. We've been trained to trust. There's those moments where we are doubting, but we've seen God step in and make things. We've been trained. We have a whole experience with God who's helped us. You don't just trust somebody you don't have a relationship with. You don't just trust somebody you don't know. You don't trust somebody where there's no communication. So when you continue to develop your relationship with God and you begin to identify those God moments and those God markers in your life, it builds your trust. But the thing that guides you, the acknowledgement of God, how do you acknowledge God in all that you do? You acknowledge God in all that you do within being guided and shaped by, in my opinion, the teachings of Jesus for us as believers. It may have meant something different in the Old Testament, right? But that idea of listening to God, how do we learn to cultivate listening to God? How do we learn to do what God would want us to do? I think Jesus teaches that, right? I think Jesus teaches that for us. And I think that becomes critical. The teachings of Jesus is critical, right? And LaShawn says, it's like when they crossed Red Sea, they had to be frightened. I couldn't imagine what they saw on each side as they crossed. But because the miracle was so great, the pressure was at hand, they were able to cross over. Yeah, they were over the, look, they took a chance walking through the sea rather than being killed by Pharaoh's army, right? Same thing. That's what it is. When we've seen the movements of God, we Sunday, sometimes it's our thoughts that are the enemies. Pause. Let's say it again. Sometimes it's hard to trust our understanding. The enemy. I'm going to say it again. There are times when our thoughts can be the enemy. Now, I know there are folk who know about that. When your thoughts begin to work against you, that sometimes we reinforce the negativity in our lives. We reinforce the negative energy in our lives. And we begin to feed into that negative energy, those negative thoughts, and we begin to think through those thoughts. And in that way, it's hard to trust. I've learned that sometimes when I'm leading in fear or I let my insecurities lead, it's hard to trust those thoughts. If I let feeling inferior lead, it's hard to trust those thoughts. Those thoughts are challenging. But can I just tell you this? You know what makes them more challenging? When you actually believe that you can eradicate those negative thoughts because you heard one sermon or you read a passage in the Bible. If you've been speaking negatively to yourself for years, the only way you can come out of that is to yourself for years. You have to counter the negative you've been doing. You can't just banish the negative. I wish it was that easy. I wish I could get up in the morning and say, negative thoughts be gone, right? Right? Negative thoughts be gone. But that's not how it works. You have to develop a habit of countering those negative thoughts with the positive thoughts, right? And not trust the negative, because you know what the negative will do. You're sitting here at the precipice of a powerful moment in your life, and you start questioning whether or not you're really qualified. You start questioning whether or not you're really equipped. You say, man, maybe I can't get this. Maybe I can't go after this job. Maybe I can't go back to school for this degree. You start talking yourself out of all the reasons you could do it, and you hold yourself back because you were listening and trusting what? You were trusting the negative thoughts. You were trusting the negative thoughts. That's why we can't always lean on our understanding, because sometimes our thoughts are guided by emotions, and those emotions that are influenced by trauma can be negative, right? But if there's nothing, I don't, Tice, those, I've had this before. You speak in a way at times that is not, when it's very Pauline, but it ain't very Jesus. And here's the truth. We are very Pauline in our thinking. This separation between the natural and the spiritual. I don't think that way personally, because Jesus didn't speak that way. Paul spoke that way for sure, but Jesus didn't speak that way. Life is life. We are always spiritual. There is no moment where we're not spiritual. The old adage says that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. But what happens in the church, we equate being spiritual to being righteous, or we equate being spiritual to being holy, or we equate being spiritual to being of God. To be human is to be spiritual. We are spiritual beings. We're always spiritual. We are spiritual creatures, spiritual entities. But in the scriptures, Paul makes this dichotomy between in the spirit and in the flesh. I don't know what in the flesh means. Then you correct these categories of what flesh means. Flesh is sin. Flesh is bad. Flesh is all these things, and the spirit is good. So they good flesh bad. No, you are a spiritual being. And you know what with your spiritual self you do? Sometimes you make mistakes with your spiritual self, and sometimes you lie with your spiritual self, and sometimes you're not quite honest with your spiritual self. And with your spiritual self, sometimes you get afraid with your spiritual self. Sometimes you're pure. All those things are part of our understanding as human beings, right? So that is what we are spiritual beings, but that doesn't negate that doesn't negate the flaws we may have, right? So I think that we have to always remember that. Don't make these false in the spirit. I don't know when to trigger spirit, trigger natural, how that comes. I know we're spiritual, period. And we are those beings. But here's the deal. If every time, I'm gonna go back to the illustration of my granddaughter. If every time she jumps, she's caught. Every time. If she jumps 30 times, she's caught 30 times. If she jumps 40 times, she's caught 40 times, right? If it comes to the 41st jump, why would she hesitate? Why would she hesitate if she's been caught for 40 times? She doesn't have an experience to doubt. She doesn't have an experience of doubting. Now, here's what I've learned. I can doubt sometimes, like I've experienced God in a myriad of ways that to doubt God's presence in my life wouldn't make sense. Sometimes, and this is where I was going earlier, it is not trusting God that we have a problem with. Sometimes it's the ways of God we have a problem with. Or let's keep it real. We have a problem with the timing of God. Because here's the honest truth. We wish, and I know we do, I say it all the time, we wish that God's timetable was on ours. We wish that God sometimes, checked in with us before moves were made. Here we go. All right. Sorry, I'll give you some more time now. So I'm gonna pick right up where I left from. I said that first of all, let me get a thumbs up, make sure we good. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what's going on tonight. This is strange. The enemy's trying to stop somebody from hearing this tonight. But what I was saying is that what sometimes gets us is God's timing, and how God moves, right? And what I realize is that when we sit there and we are open to how God will move, and someone has said, when you've been waiting for something for a long time and it doesn't come to pass, you've been hoping, praying. But here's what I realized. There are things that God is bringing into my life now and in the past couple of years, things that I've waited over a decade, sometimes 2 decades for it to happen. And what I realized, when God moves and does that, right, you forget about the years that it didn't happen. I hope you get that. In the scriptures, it said that God will restore the years that the moth and the locust consumed. Those years that you thought you were losing, those years where things weren't working together, that God will restore those years. You got to trust God for that. Let me tell you what I also learned. There were times I asked God for things that I was not ready for. I was not ready for. There were moments where I cried out to God to do things, cried out to God to move situations, cried out to God to deliver me. I cried out to God for things. And I realized in hindsight, I had to say, God, I thank you that you didn't pay attention to that. I'm grateful you didn't pay attention to that request, because that request wasn't smart. I wasn't thinking. I didn't know all the facts. I didn't know where I would be going. That there are moments when God doesn't honor things because we don't always know what is happening, what is going on in those moments. So trusting God in that moment is trusting your experience with God, trusting them times when God moved, that it was nobody but God. Trust the ways that God moves. Sometimes God moves through other people in some strange ways that we can't anticipate. Don't always try to work on things on your own or figure things out on your own. There are moments when you have to lean into God's presence and know, listen, God, I can't figure this all out on my own. I can't get all the answers. So I am opening my spirit right now to the ways you may be moving in this situation. It doesn't mean I'm not trying to move. I'm just sitting still. No, it means that I'm moving, but trusting God. And then you say, well, how do you move, Pastor? You trust God? You sit still? You trust God? No, you trust God in the midst of the situation, but then you live your life according for what I said earlier, to the teachings of Jesus. So while I'm trusting God, I'm still living, I'm still loving, I'm still serving, I'm still honoring God with my guideposts, how I live my life, how I show up to those particular teachings. Yeah, Greg, surrender, but surrender to what? Surrender to ideas, surrender to hope. It's surrendering to the ways God is moving in your life. It's surrendering to the teachings. For example, we can say surrender, right? But if you still hate people who hate you, you ain't surrendered yet. If you can only love people who love you, you haven't surrendered yet. If you can only love up until the point of your prejudices, you haven't surrendered yet. That's what I mean by surrendering to what? Not surrendering to an idea of God, but surrendering to the ways that God is leading and guiding us. And for us, it is the teachings of Jesus. They are right there. You got to read a little bit. You got to get under a good teacher. You have to let the teachings emerge, but it's there. You read Matthew 5-7, the Sermon on the Mount. Read the Beatitudes in that. You can go through Luke and see Luke 4-18, and when Jesus begins to announce the ministry, they're there. That's why having a good teacher is important. I'm not being funny with that. But they're there. That's how we live our lives. The same way at FCBC, we make our decisions, we shape our actions by our core values: live, love, serve, called to live, commanded to love, create, commissioned to serve. That's how we live. The question becomes for you tonight: what guides your movements in this world? That's the question I want to give you tonight, beloved. What guides your movements in this world? Do you get up every day and just go along to get along? But when you wake up every day and you begin the day, what actually guides you? What guides your steps? What guides your thought? What guides your interactions with people? What guides how you show up in the world? That's what I mean. See, what happens in this movement, beloved, is that you have people who say, well, I'm a Christian. And they say they're Christianity because I believe Jesus Christ came, lived, died, and rose again for my sins. And that's the extent of it. That's what they'll say. I believe that Jesus Christ died for my sins, and I accept that, and that's the extent of it. Well, that's a formula that Jesus didn't even teach. Because I know people who can recite that formula, but never change their life. I know people who can say, yes, I believe that Jesus Christ, the head of my life. I believe that he died for my sins. I believe that he died and rose on the third day. I believe all that, and their hearts not be converted. See, the teachings of Jesus is not about an easy affirmation to declare your faith. It is about a journey in life to show up in a particular way. That's what your guidepost is. Because if you get up every day and you say, well, I go to church on Sundays, but all that I learned is not weaving through me. I'm not shifting my life. I don't see myself growing and evolving. Something is off. Something is off. What guides your movements in this world? What shapes how you show up in this world? That is important. It's not about how do I deal with just this situation? How do I deal with that situation? All that is real. But how you show up in this world needs to be consistent, and it needs to be ever growing and ever evolving in a positive way, right? The way how I forgive now is not how I forgave 35, 40, 30 years ago. I wasn't quick to forgive back then. I could hold a grudge with the best of them. How I show up now is not the same way. I've grown in that journey. I've grown through the teachings of Jesus, right? And I understand the power of forgiveness. How I loved 30 years ago is not how I love now. I love differently now because of my growth in this journey, my growth in this movement, my allowing the teachings to really find a resting place in my spirit, the teachings of Jesus, right? How I deal with people who don't like me now is different than how I deal with people who didn't like me years ago. I felt like maybe 30 years ago, I was more compelled to get people to like me. Now, here, if you don't like me, it's not my responsibility to get you to like me. My responsibility to show up as the best version of Michael that I can. And whether you like me or not, that has no bearing on how I show up. In other words, who I was then is not who I am now. I have evolved. I continue to grow. I continue to evolve. But what guides that growth, what guides that evolution, is the teaching of Jesus. When I was young out there hustling the street and making some change, or I was going shopping, I had to have all the fancy things and all the luxury things, the jewelry, the rope chains, the rings, all that. But those are not my sensibilities anymore. That doesn't move me anymore. Material things don't mean anything to me anymore. I've evolved. Why? Because of what guides me. What does it profit a person to gain the world and lose your soul? Those things that line from Jesus didn't even impact me at 20, really, or maybe 19, the way it impacts me now. I have grown in the faith. I have evolved because of what guides my character, what guides my life, what shapes how I show up in this world. For me, it's the teachings of Jesus, and that's why I'm committed to studying those things and understanding the ways of the carpenter, because they shape how I show up in the world. Right? So when I hear, trust in the Lord with all your heart, God has given us more than enough reasons to trust. And lean not on your own understanding. Sometimes it's good to know that you don't have to figure it out all by yourself. And sometimes it's hard to trust your thoughts because your thoughts can easily betray you. In all your ways, acknowledge God. Live a life that's worthy of the transformation. Live a life that is shaped by the guideposts in your life. Those guideposts are the teachings of Jesus. And you may say, Pastor, it's hard to get it all. But man, I can tell you about FCBC. Live, love, serve. Live the life you are called to live. That means be authentically you, and authentically you in relationship to God. Love beyond the limits of your prejudices. Let love be your guide. and commission to serve. Serve other people. It's not that hard, beloved, if we put our lives to it. And we don't feel we got to all of a sudden overnight change. Ever evolving community you're a part of. We are ever evolving. And my role in this community, one of my roles is to teach. I'm going to teach. I'm going to give you the tools necessary to stay grounded in Jesus's teachings, but also give you the tools necessary to help you face yourself and be honest with yourself, because it's hard to grow if you can't be honest with yourself about who you are. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's hard to be real about you when you cannot be honest with you. It's hard to be authentic if you cannot be honest about who you are, beloved. And that's important. Evolution is real as we human beings, but sometimes that evolution is halted because we can't be honest with ourselves. In all our ways, acknowledge God. In all our ways, live according to the guideposts. Live according to the teaching. Here it is. And God will direct your path. Or God will make your path straight. God will make ways for you. I believe that, beloved. That God can make those crooked roads straight. God can make those rough roads plain. God can move mountains out of your way. God can do all that. We have responsibility to trust in the Lord. Don't try to do it on your own. Follow the teachings of the carpenter and watch God move in your life in a profound way, beloved. I believe that with all of my heart tonight. So we had a few technical errors. I think I figured it out. It might have been on my end. I apologize for that. But for those who came late tonight, in a few weeks, not next week, so don't go tell anybody next week. In a few weeks, you'll see the announcement, and I'll make it in a few weeks. We'll start moving from this book. So you got some few weeks to get it. How to Read the Bible. We'll put it out on, I'll talk about it on Sunday, but How to Read the Bible by Harvey Cox. Get the book. Get the book. We're going to be using it. And it's a challenging, it can be a little challenging, but I'm going to teach. I'm going to help you weave your way through this book. So get it now. We'll start this in a few weeks. But I pray tonight, beloved, that something was said was helpful. I pray Sunday's sermon was helpful. It helped me, I know that much, because sometimes, man, God had rescued me from me, and that's real. And so hopefully, don't forget, tomorrow is midweek motivation prayer call early in the morning, 7:15, and then at 1 p.m. on Eastern time on IG Live. 1 p.m. Eastern time on IG Live. Friday at 7 is Inward Journey. We will start this week. We didn't start this past Friday, beloved, but we will start this week on Friday for the Inward Journey. And then on Tuesday, we'll be right back here on live stream for TNT, our virtual TNT. We'll be in the building again, October 22nd. Write that down. Mark your calendar if you're in the New York area. October 22nd, we'll be in person in the building at TNT. And other than that, we'll be on stream. So again, thank you for tonight. Thank you for being a part of TNT. And we won't pray out tonight. Right where you are, listen, I can't hear you, but you can hear you. I can hear me. You can hear me. I want us to leave tonight with our identity statement. Come on, fam, let's declare those words. We are an ever-evolving community of visionaries, dreamers, and doers who have been called by God to live the lives we were created to live, commanded by God to love beyond the limits of our prejudices, and commissioned by God to serve. Called to live, commanded to love, and commissioned to serve. And family, how do we say it? We live, we love, we serve. Until next Tuesday, much love, peace, and many blessings. Have a good night.